What's the deal here? Grasses, weeds, they getting the most of you? They digging themselves into your garden? How frustrating is this? You come out to the garden after you've been away for a few days. This is what you're greeted with. Bermuda grass, weeds, all kinds of things entering that aren't supposed to be there. What's a gardener to do? Today's episode, we're going to cover what you might do if you came home to such a situation. Or maybe even what you might do if you're about to build a garden and your best friend Jody told you, you should solarize those weeds. Yeah, I've been to your place and you've got a lot of weeds. You should definitely solarize them. So what do we do? Okay, so of your four options, you have simple greenhouse plastic. Comes in various thicknesses, various durabilities. It's reusable. Even if it gets dirty, it can be cleaned. Lasts several years. If you've already used it on your hoop or your greenhouses, it's great to upcycle this to doing things like solarizing during certain times of the year. And with the right expectations, you'll do a good job with this material. Second to this clear plastic is the clear plastic that you purchase from the home centers or Walmart, Lowe's, Home Depot, Menards, etc. It's just a polyethylene sheeting, okay? Doesn't have any special properties to it. When the sun sits on it for a long period of time, it tends to get cloudy, all right? Then it becomes more of an opaque sheet than a clear sheet. As you can see here, we've used this before. In this particular case, if I was to utilize this for solarizing purposes, it's already been compromised by the sun, and as far as that goes, I suspect it will only be marginally reduced as far as its efficacy for use as a solarizing cover, okay, marginally. But bear in mind, it's not a great solarizing cover to begin with. So let's move on to the next one. Black poly sheeting. You can get this in the same aisle as the clear poly sheeting. It absorbs more light. It's still mostly impermeable for moisture and oxygen and gas. So if this is laid tightly over the top of your soil, there's a pretty good chance it's going to block lots of light. And anytime we're blocking lots of light, photosynthesis is compromised. Okay? So we know plants need these things. We know they need photosynthesis. They need light. They need, what else? Water and a sufficient gas exchange at their feet so they can respire properly. When they've been deprived of those three things, it makes it harder for them to grow, makes it harder for them to thrive. Most weeds, most perennial and annular plants will suffer greatly if you cover them with black plastic and cut off the photosynthesis process. So let's move past this pretty quick. The fourth and final piece of plastic I'm going to show you, this is also a poly sheeting, and it is a silage type. You can see clearly it's black on one side, that side, and white on the other side, that side. So this can be used as a reflective surface or light absorptive surface. Either way, you have two options to use this. Better manufacturers of this particular product will give you a warranty for each face. So typically I can get a year's use out of this face and a year's use out of this face. As you can see, this is just cut off remnant from a project that we did. There's nothing special about this plastic as far as I'm aware, other than the fact that it's black on one side and white on the other side. No matter what happens when we utilize those two postures, black and white, there's going to be some portion of the light spectrum that's going to be blocked. Okay, you know what? There's a fifth and final material that can be used, and it's one that I actually prefer. It's called EPDM, and it's a material that's commonly used in the construction industry. It's a heavyweight rubber, and it's normally classified as a non-toxic or inert rubber blend. So with that being said, if this particular material is left on the surface of the ground for long or extended periods of time, the chances of chemical transfer to the soil is very low. If we were to look at pretty much any of the other four plastics, there's going to be a chance that those plastics can be broken down, and if they're broken down enough or for long enough, they could possibly transfer micronized size of plastics, little tiny pieces of plastic, into the soil where you intend to grow your food. As far as I'm concerned, that's not necessarily a great attribute for soil to have plasticizers or polyethylene or polyurethane or any type of poly that's not actually natural to the soil, within the soil. At some point, there's going to be that question as to whether or not those pieces of plastics are going to be taken up into your plants. We already know that many plants are accumulative of the things that are in their environment around them, and that will include also plastic remnants that are left over in your soil. As those of you remember, when we talk about preparing gardens, one of the first layers we'll put down is some form of a cardboard or a craft paper, and cardboard typically comes with tape. We want to remove that tape for a reason, because we don't want the soil microbes breaking it down and then feeding it to the plants. All right? So that being said, I want to go back to the EPDM. The EPDM is very heavy and it's very strong. And if you happen to have farm animals or dogs or cats or deer or critters that frequent your garden, there's a pretty good chance that whatever you're utilizing to solarize is going to be somewhat at the mercy of your visitors. Okay? The EPDM makes that no longer an issue. In the construction industry, this material is used to line the bottom of shower stalls, shower pans, underneath certain wet floors or wet walls, on the top of roofs underneath another finished roofing layer, flat roofs covered with, well, anyway, you get the point. The construction industry is pretty fond of EPDM. I'm fond of EPDM for some of the same reasons. It doesn't allow any moisture to pass through it. It doesn't allow any light to pass through it. We've tested it. No light gets through it. And more importantly, it's heavyweight, so it makes it much easier to bind to the floor. If you've got a windy side of your garden that you're trying to solarize, it's always best to weight down the edges of your tarp, your plastic sheet, your EPDM, whatever material you're using. Weight it down really, really well to pin it down all the way around. Even if a small amount of air or wind gets underneath that tarp, there's a chance that temperatures can, well, they can moderate, and it might act more like a greenhouse than like a solarization project. Okay? So keep all that stuff in mind. A lot of people will suggest the use of a clear plastic tarp, and if it's held too loosely above the ground, that plastic tarp is simply going to act like a greenhouse. If it's pinned down tightly, and or we've also put some form of stressful chemistry on the ground, like vinegar. In my case, I like to use white vinegar because it's mildly acidic. The grasses and the weeds, most of them don't like it. If you find that it's not strong enough, there's also other types of vinegar that are used for horticulture, used for specifically killing weeds and grasses and some other woody brush things. So with that in mind, I would suggest that you go forward with the use of those things with an abundance of caution, because if any of that were to leach out to some of your desirable plants or plantings, there's a good chance that you might impact them negatively. I like to use it if I'm preparing a new bed. I'll go ahead and I'll cut the grasses and weeds down really, really low, and then I'll go ahead and I'll spray a nice coating of straight household white vinegar over the top of it, and I'll cover it with a plastic sheet, and before you know it, within the next couple of days, everything's dead. Okay? So when I want to move on to the next step, which is to lay down a sheet of cardboard or some craft paper. I like craft paper because it molds the ground better. My ground here isn't perfect. I'm kind of on a slope in most areas. I'm not always fortunate enough to have a perfectly smooth surface, and I do find that the craft tends to follow the contour a whole lot better, and it offers about the same resistance to things growing up from underneath it as cardboard does, because my ground is pretty moist once I cover it with wood chips, and the worms and everything else, they're just going to come to it and attack it like it's a festival. So it doesn't last a long time. In any event, cardboard double layering, triple layering, if you've got really, really invasive rhizome type grasses, you're going to want to do something like that, and then cover it deeply with compost and mulch. So if you have that stuff to begin with, it's great. If you don't, you might have to do it a little differently. In the case of silage tarps, you can cover a lot of ground fast. Silage tarps are made with a specific intent to break down and decompose whatever material is growing above your earth line. So you've got to really, really give some good thought to what you're about to do. And these are the reasons why I really like the EPDM, because the EPDM is very difficult to tear. if it doesn't have a tear in it already, it's not likely to tear. It's very durable. It really has a really good way of raising soil temperatures quickly with a minimal amount of solar influence. And because it's so heavy, it needs far less material and ballast to keep it held down in place during windy days. And we get plenty of windy days here, folks. I'm sure you all do too. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take you over there and give you an example, show you what that looks like. Okay, so right over here I've got a good example of EPDM. It's a very heavy rubber. You can see here, very durable. It's got significant weight to it. It's thick. It's not going to tear easily. Works really well, especially over Bermuda grass. You can see that little edge right there. There's already some signs of decomposition going on, where we might have some actinobacteria or some forms of mycology that's breaking things down. It's very effective. So we presented 4 or 5 different options for silage. If you got something out of it, little gold nugget here or there, click like, subscribe, share it with your friends. Either way, be well, grow more. Let's get out there and clean up those gardens. It's fall. Peace.